Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening for what is going to be an absolutely fascinating and actually a very, very rare chance to listen to somebody who's at the top of their profession and working in spaces that most of us only ever visit as visitors, not as somebody who's actually making decisions and creating those very important social and cultural spaces. I'm delighted to introduce Director Mazzantini. It's quite hard to summarize your many, many roles, but obviously the director refers to the Gallery of Modern and Contemporary Art that many of you will have seen and hopefully visited in Parioli. But you're also engaged with many other spaces, cultural spaces, where contemporary art is displayed, as well as teaching. So you're teaching at Lewis, a fascinating course about museums, the studies of how to run a museum, what a museum is, and what its purpose is in our society. And I'd love it, actually, if the students could be thinking of some questions around all of this as we're talking, as we're discussing these ideas. So what I thought we could do is if we just run through some of those institutions that you work with and directing, and then maybe if we move into a discussion about art itself and the art world, maybe touching on some of the topics that you cover in your course. So how many of the students recognize that building? Yes? And how many of you have actually been inside? Oh, fantastic. Well done. That's wonderful. So one of the things you will have noticed is that it is a very interestingly laid out museum. A lot of thought goes into the arrangement of the artwork within that space, not simply chronological. All sorts of different concepts and ideas are being thought about in the choices that are made there. So maybe actually if we start with some of the other projects that you've worked with. So the Quirinale. So what is the contemporary space at the Quirinale?
So when I was working with public administration for several years, since 2001, and when the President Mattarella came to the Quirinale, the palace was a museum of itself, but as the President said, it was a museum of a period that ended, which was the royal time. And we discovered opening to the public the museum, the Quirinale, that became practically a museum. Now it's open every day except Monday and Thursday. We discovered that the perception of the visitor was wrong, because they were looking at the Quirinale as a museum of something that was not the identity of the place, which is the house of the President of the Republic. So we started, I'm the curator of Quirinale Contemporaneo and also advisor for architecture and art. We, of course, prepared the building to host visitors, of course, a limited number of visitors, but then we discovered that it was necessary to represent the Republican time, the Republican era. And so how do you represent it in a place which has a collection of 116,000 works of art? We need to have artifacts from the latest time, so from the Republican era, which means after 1946. And that's why we started to have a collection, melting the new arrivals, the new artwork with the oldest one. The Quirinale Palace was built in 1583, so we have more than 400 years of story. We have several architects, several artists. And so now in the rooms we have Fontana with Pietro da Cortona, we have Guido Reni with, in this case we have Buonanotte, we have Burri with, again, Pietro da Cortona. So we have the representation of the history of our country, but until nowadays. So this was the project. Now we have a collection of more than 200 artworks, And the collection is growing because it's a project in theory, that means ongoing. And this was a very good example because, Italy, especially when you see all the, for example, the news on TV, etc., you see very often politicians with old style and settings like golden mirrors or Renaissance paintings. And now sometimes you start seeing them with modern and contemporary artifacts behind. And so after this, because our president Mattarella is an example for everybody, many other institutions started to copy this project and to introduce in the cultural heritage of public institutions, which means the seat, for example, also the seat of the Senate, the seat of the Chamber of Deputies are working on that, the Palazzo Chigi, to have a more real representation of our country, which is not living only on the memories of the past, but is still a country that produces a lot of creativity, art, design, fashion, and everything.
Fantastic. And you mentioned briefly that you came into that as an architect originally.
I'm an architect.
So, yes.
I'm an architect. I have a PhD in preservation of landscape and natural and anthropic landscape. I was appointed in the Chamber of Deputies as advisor of the Speaker for Art and Architecture, and then I'm working on both. And that's why I started from conservation because I was appointed as a superintendency, but for my personal passion and for an idea that I have of the cultural heritage. I've been also a member of the UNESCO Commission. So what I think is that the cultural heritage is dynamic, and every generation has to add something which one day will be proud to become antique, ancient. So if we stop that we had for generation in Italy, we had a very dense, very stratificato, come si dice?
Stratified
heritage, because we started 3,000 years ago, and every generation added something. So in my point of view, I'm really keen on the cultural heritage. This is my most greatest interest. But nowadays, we have to work on what is happening nowadays. We have to preserve and we have to build for the next generation, the heritage, which means that we have to cope with what is going on now. Mm-hmm. So we have to cope with the artists that are going now, and I work always permanently on the refurbishment, the restoration of what we have, also in my museum, the persistence, which is always important, and innovation on the other side have to be the two faces of a single coin. So this is the idea.
Fantastic. Let's move on to the Villa Firenze.
There's just a little aspect of the sound of people, perhaps that might help.
Thank you.
In sort of, it looks sort of medieval,
yes.
But it's not.
It is not. Maybe, as I told you, we started with the Quirinale, but then a few institutional places want to copy this model, and so this is the Italian embassy to Washington. This is the residence of the ambassador. This is a villa in a Tudor style, which is considered a monument there because it's a listed building of 1925. In Italy, it's quite modern. So the United States is an ancient building. And being the seat of our ambassador is where all the events take place, and it is important. It's like an identity card of Italy, and so there also were only paintings and artworks of the last centuries, and there we brought 50 artworks of authors from the 50s till nowadays, from Fontana to Burri. It was a great success. It's still going on. Ambassador Peronaci told me that the new ambassador wants to improve the collection. So maybe we will have also an exhibition in the next year, the 2nd of June. So if you want, you can go on and you can show them something. And so we started building collections after the Quirinale, for example, in this Villa Firenze Contemporanea. I was working also with many other embassies. Before that, maybe we can go on, maybe, or if because maybe it's nice to see the Quirinale just for a video.
Yes, I'm showing it here, but
what is,
there we go.
Here we are talking. It's not there. I will show them only the Quirinale because there is a video which is nicer. So you see what we are talking about. So this was the first project that was appointed, and then this project had, as I told you, developments. So we did that in the embassy at the Holy Seat. We did that in the embassy at in Washington, in the United States. Then I was starting to work with other embassies. I gave them some advices, but I didn't have the chance to complete the project. I completed the project in the Ministry of Infrastructures and Transports. I completed the project in Villa Reale in Monza, which is again another seat. And then I won the public competition to go to the National Gallery because it has been a concorso, and so that I had to leave this project, but I'm happy I'm doing something different there.
What's fascinating is in both cases, the Quirinale and the embassy, there's this sense of a dialogue between the past and the present, and recognizing that both things are representing Italy. So the present is obviously informed by the past, but the present shouldn't be drowned out by the past. And there's, as you said, the constant need for reinvention, for a sense of forward momentum rather than a kind of stagnation.
So I try to speak easily in a clear way for the students, but if you don't understand, just ask me. I don't know what you know about history of art, but the history of art has a kind of continuity, linear continuity up to the early years of the 20th century. Then we had the avant-garde movement that broke this continuity. And after that, the past and the present were not seen, as I told you, in harmony, but for a while that they have been seen in contrast. Why was this? It was a reaction because for years and years, centuries, people were looking at the past and copying and looking at this. And with the Bauhaus and Duchamp and others, they said, we want to start from scratch. So it's different. We have to clean up our mind, to be very, very free in order to create something new. Of course, this happened more than 100 years ago. It was, as I told you, you can say Duchamp, 1917, a bit earlier, Bauhaus, 1919. So that time. Now we are 2025. So this is history, it's not anymore necessary. So what all the countries said after a period of being a very a rebellion, now in the last 20, 30 years, Italy comes a little bit later, what is happening is that we are trying to melt again with the past, and we are trying to rebuild this continuity, which is very important. So it changes a lot also when you display museums. Of course, how you display artwork in museums, because of course, for a while we were talking about the white cube, which means you need a room which is a cube, very simple, all white, to enhance the artwork. This is not considered true anymore. And this is this project demonstrated that you can display, or even in very rich context, contemporary art. Because if contemporary art is good, it can stand everywhere.
Yes. At this point, I'd love to see if any of the students or some of our guests wanted to ask a question. We'll come back to our conversation, but just at this point, looking at this connection between the past and the present, the melting, I love that word that you're using. Yes, so there's a student there with a question.
Hello, so I live like 2 seconds from the Galleria of Arte Moderna. I live at Pinciano, so I do that street to go to school every day, and every time they're in front where the lions are in the front of the steps, they're like art things, modern art. For example, there was one last week I saw like one art, like silver, really strange. And my question is, where do they go like after? Because then after you take them out, do they go in or like what do you do with them?
Interesting. No, this one did not go in, it went away. The silver one was a Chinese artwork connected to an exhibition that we had called East and West, where we displayed we did a comparison between Italian and Chinese artworks, and this was from a Chinese artwork. That artwork comes from a museum in Munich, so we borrowed it. So it was on loan and we had to give it back. There is another artwork that you're seeing, he's going to be in our collection, it was donated. Our beloved lion, we sent the lion for the Pope we sent our beloved lion, which has his place as a king in front of the stairs, but it's temporary in the garden of the Cavalieri di Malta. Cavalieri di Malta as an homage, because you see they have the little hole, and you can see St. Peter's, and you can see the lion, and this is an homage to our new Pope. So it's there until 1 month, then he comes back.
Another question. Oh, is that Nicholas? Yeah.
What inspired you to do what you do?
This is also a good question. When I was very young, I was drawing a lot. Drawing. I love drawing. And I think I had all the time a kind of, for architects, drawing is a way of thinking, doing. We say that, pensare facendo, because your ideas come out in a different way, no? We see space, it's very simple. Then I started painting. I wanted to be, for a while, I wanted to be an artist. I was trying also, I love to design my clothes, for example. I was drawing my house, my clothes, everything. But I was also creative. My family said, art, better architecture. But I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to them. And so I said, okay, let's go for architecture. And I think it was a good choice for me.
A final question, student at the end. Thank you, Nicholas. Pass it down.
I was wondering because I've also driven past Galleria Borghese, and I've seen that on the steps they're like a different artwork, like every couple months or so. Is there a reason behind that?
Yes, because we try to put out of the museum what we have inside. And so because we do some temporary exhibitions, some shows, we want the people from outside to understand what's going on inside. So maybe you are interested in looking at inside.
Do you have to go in too? Yeah. Okay, so if we carry on. So this is an interesting space. Not Massachusetts, but this is Rome. This is the MIT of Porta Pia.
Yes, I didn't show you, but we succeeded. I did that with the last minister, which was Giovannini, but then nowadays Salvini is still going on with this project to put inside the Ministry of Infrastructures a few artworks which are very interesting. So, for example, we have Elon Musk that went there with an artwork from his Gro, which is behind him, and so it's quite interesting. We have the pictures. So this is important for Italian artists because, for example, when the president is with the press or these ministers are with the press and you see a contemporary artwork behind, they're so happy. And people also get used to see this because the language, for you that you are very young, this is maybe easier, but it's not for everybody, no? To see, for example, a hole or a cat in a canvas is not so easy to understand, even nowadays, even for many people, no? So you get used to different languages.
And this is Palazzo Borromeo, which also I think a lot of our students will recognize from having driven past. So what's this used for?
This is the National Embassy to the Holy Seat, and this is, we did a good project there as well with the refurbishment, and there I think we put like around 40 artworks, and also I also always use art and design both, and so we put we did the new image of the palace, and it is quite interesting as well.
Fantastic. And this is the Regia Contemporanea. So what's this project?
And this project is the same. This is a royal palace, very, very huge, 700 rooms, close to Monza, you know, where the Grand Prix of Formula One takes place, is in the garden of this royal palace. Of course, the royal palace is not used anymore, and it's like it was the summer residence of the second king, Umberto, and it was practically empty, so we decided to fill up all the what was missing, because we were missing also furniture, we were missing artworks and an atmosphere, as I can say, doing some site-specific artworks with interesting artists, and it's quite interesting. It's quite nice.
So when you use the expression "filling up," so where are you getting it? Are there sort of collections that you're drawing on?
In each place we do different things. For example, in Monza, there were rooms where there were tapestries that were taken away and brought somewhere else, and they left precise holes in the decoration. So we asked a few artists to fill them up, and it's very, maybe I can I? But do we have internet here? Well, maybe we can try. And but for example, in the Quirinale, all the project was done from the generosity of philanthropic attitude of the participants. So we, for example, asked the artists or the foundation that represent the artists that are dead, like Burri, Fontana, Afro, to give something. And so we depended also on what was available. And unfortunately, for example, we don't have a Capogrossi, we don't have a Schifano, but the idea of the president is, I don't want to ask to public museums because I don't want to take anything from the public heritage to be here. I want to add more artworks to the public heritage that before were not visible and not open to the public. So this was the idea. In other cases, the idea was different, but mostly in general, it went direct to the artists, because you see, another important thing that was behind this idea is to reconnect politics, which means the public administration, to art, the world of art itself. Because the world of art, the young artists, the artists need to be in some ways promoted by big institutions. And they were so happy. I must tell that the generosity came out because they were really, really happy, and they wanted to participate. They felt honored. I think that the best way is that we go to the because the Quirinale is well done, is the most interesting. So you can see what we are talking about, and probably. So you see Vedova, no? You see Vedova, these are the lions which are modern. This is an installation of light, which is not easy to see, but for example. So you see this is Pistoletto, are big and small, but you see that we have the present and the past all together. This is, of course, very well done. But in all these places, we have videos. This is Burri, for example, and this is made all by Armani, and there was a Castellani. This is the Chirico. So you see how the spaces change. Sometimes they change quite a lot, as this is an installation, Paolini, this is Manzoni. This is a big installation by Mario Cello. The next exhibition in the National Gallery will be a Mario Cello. This is a site-specific artwork, for example. So it was done on purpose because it has a particular meaning, and it was done for this place for the president, and is the artist erased the Russian laws, and this is so the settlement of what we have done in Quirinale. Now it's much bigger. We have around 80 rooms. In each one of them you see something, and some of them were completely refurbished as well. And yes, we have many videos, but I think it's okay. And this happened. We have the videos also of the other seats. Some of them are really beautiful, like the one you've seen, and the contrast is like this. Of course, in Villa Firenze the space is smaller, so you see even the effect in the end is more contemporary because we have less artwork from the past.
Okay. I'd love to ask the students what they think of that, seeing those modern artworks in the context of a Baroque palace or even a Renaissance palace. Is that shocking? A bit shocking?
We can show them. This goes on internet.
Yes, should do.
But because you can see maybe something which is because I don't think
Oh, this is a new. Do you want to search or something?
non posso cercare.
Because what's fascinating as well is that kind of sets an example. If you do happen to own a palace, you have permission now to fill it with modern art as well as classical art.
Just to show you the most brave interventions we did in Monza. I don't see the one I wanted to show you, but because as I told you, we did some site-specific artworks, but and not on internet, but this is the only one, but which is. So you see here, for example, this is where I told you there were missing some artworks. It's like what Basilis did in Palazzo Grimani. And this artist filled what was missing. There were tapestries missing with these two big contemporary artwork in Monza. But there are more, but I cannot, maybe this one. This is one. So this is, for example, what was done in Monza. So we spoke with this artist, which by the way is quite young, and they decided to fill up this. Of course, this was, I am also part of the Ministry of Culture, but there was the superintendent of Monza, which was already involved. Of course, these are also all reversible intervention because it's like the tapestry that was there. You can remove it, but we tried to fill the gap. And this was a particular installation done on the Shakespeare Hamlet, La Corte di Danimarca, quindi the court, which had something similar too, because you know the story of Monza is very complicated. The king was murdered there, so it's it's a very complicated story. So this is to show you that sometimes we have been also quite brave, and in Villa Firenze it was less. But we did, I think. So I don't know if you want to go back to. So these are these kind of operations we are doing.
And finally, we're we're back home. And again, for a while, actually, there's been this dialogue between the different periods, the past, the present, at the Galleria. So how long has that been? Was that an idea that was trialed at the Quirinale and then transferred, or the other way around?
The other way around. Allora, I just want to show you the new website. Maybe it's nice if you look at it, because there are already a few images of the new, exactly. Ecco, so we speak with that behind. Is nice. Ecco. So you will start seeing how it changes. Now, when I arrived to the gallery, I saw that there was an exhibit designed that was inspired by a chronological, we can say, thematical setting, but it was very difficult. It was very difficult to understand because this is a public institution, but you see, the Quirinale is a museum of itself. And so, for example, there you cannot, the seat of the President of the Republic cannot express the Republican time. It's crazy, it's no sense. This is a museum of modern and contemporary art. So the institution is something which has to explain, has a didactic function, has to represent what was the evolution of the history of art in the last 2 centuries. So what we did is to, I am completing, it's not finished, but it will finish we are presenting it the 1st of December, but we are on our way, 80% is completed of the space. We are trying to show in a path which is suggested but not mandatory. You see how the history of art started from Canova, because the collection of the Galleria Nazionale, the first artwork is from Canova. So we have, it's 1795, so which means we have all the 19th century, all the 20th century part of this, the 23rd century. So how we start from a classical paradigm, the neoclassical, then we go through Romanticism, then we go through Impressionism, Expressionism, cioè the big movements that we have followed, and then the avant-gardes and all the movements that come after. What I think that is important that the students and the people go there is that this evolution was very quick and became faster and with an acceleration in the last decades, and this was due to a precise link also with society and technology. Probably you all know, kids, that the big breakthrough was the invention of the cameras, because an artist was representing reality, but when technology started to represent reality better, and you know perfectly now with the AI, they invent reality. What was the artist felt lost, and they felt lost. They was looking at this picture, and you know the technology was not the one that we have nowadays, no? But they were looking at the picture, and their artwork, they say, I cannot compete with technology. And so this changed completely the aim of creativity, the aim of art, the way of rethinking art and rethinking artifacts. And since then, there were very, very, very quick changes, because art is the mirror of society. Art is the mirror of times. And if the times, they change quicker, art changes very quickly. So for us, it's also now very difficult to go and be informed of what is going on, because everything is changing a lot. And generally, art is what opens first the new ideas. Art means imagine the visions of some artists, even Piranesi, how they invented space, how they imagined Escher, no? the buildings and the space, and then it happened. Imagine cinema that brought up ideas that were built and were realized. Imagine that our cartoons now, imagine Peppa Pig, are copying Picasso. Picasso is 100 years ago. It is like this. So art becomes first, begins first, and then things happen. So everything was and has been part of a big change of the world. And this is what I want the gallery to represent.
Fantastic. So at this point, do the students want to, or our guests want to ask any questions? So we're now talking about the relationship between art and society today, particularly mentioning how technology can actually influence and shape what we do. So Ali, would you mind giving the microphone? Oh, he's right there. Okay.
I wanted to know, are there any pieces of either modern art that you've installed to replace? I forgot where it was in Monza, where you replaced the old tapestries with new ones. Are there any places where you have an old style of art that portrays a modern setting? So, for example, a Renaissance painting of, I don't know, a train station, or the opposite, where you have a more modern interpretation, such as, I don't know, an impressionist painting of Roman times, of the Roman Empire, something like that.
I think you can do both. In Monza, I did not replace the one missing, but I put instead of the one that were before. Now, I think that the continuity is very important. So why not to have an ancient painting in a modern building? If it's possible, why not? It's important. Of course, this is more really architectural, because some works of art are produced for a place. This happened when the works of art were not moving so much. So the idea of, for example, buying an artwork in a market, this is very new. Buying an artwork in a shop, in a gallery, this is very new. So thinking about ancient artworks, for example, in the antique times, Roman and Greek time, art was part of architecture. They didn't have, so they do frescoes, but frescoes means that the painting stays on the wall. You cannot take away from the wall. So art for centuries was conceived to be permanent and very linked to the place where it was for the place it was conceived. Then it was easier, of course, when they discovered canvas, the oil on canvas, the technique was much easier for the painters. You know, the fresco was very, very difficult to do. Even Leonardo has a lot of difficulties to do this. So when they discovered with technology for easier way to paint, they say, well, okay. But even in this century, so we are talking about from the Renaissance onwards, there was a commission, generally, a public commission. So the painter was called to do for a church, for a royal palace, for a palace, something. So when you remove and you change place to these artifacts, to these artworks, you always have to think very well at the settings, because the setting is not indifferent. It's like a site-specific. Nowadays, what happened? You have site-specifics, because most of the artists do site-specifics, but generally artists do their artworks for the market. So they're not so linked to the place, and so it's much easier. So I think that the idea of the site-specific, it's an added value. It's an added value. So it's good to call artists, contemporary artists, to do site specifics in old buildings, and it's also very good to call good architects that shape the rooms, shape the space in order to exhibit correctly old masterpieces.
Interesting. Another question at the back there.
With your knowledge of art, what do you think art is heading to in the next 100 years? And based on how art has been happening? No,
like how the state of the world is happening.
Non ho capito bene.
So how do you think art is going to continue to change over the next 100 years
We
based
want, we
on...
want to show them the slides.
Ah,
we have a
shall we
few
go?
slides. I show you, because you can't believe. This is the artwork which is behind the Ministry of the Infrastructures, as you said. It's a council map. So this is how it's changed. This ahead, okay. Let's see, these are all artworks. This is another story, but I want to show you. This is the art in the age of mechanical reproduction, which is something that was also a breakthrough because we don't have any original. This is the image I wanted to show you. You know what is this, no? This is the fountain. We call the fountain by Duchamp. What does this guy said is the Dada period? He said, I just sign it. There is a signature of the artist. This is already made, it's a product. But he decided to sign it, no? And he said, as you said, that as he called them, disrupted centuries of thinking about the artist's role as a skilled creator of an original handmade object. He decided that the spectator is giving the artifact the status of a work of art. So it's completely different. This is a very, very long dissertation. We could spend hours. What were the first collections? The first collections were the items that the prehistorians collected for their death. So they thought that art were gems, were little artifacts. No? The collection of the ancients were, for example, the pharaohs. They collected very strange things. The Medici, they collected, for example, cameos, and at the same time Botticelli's painting. No? So the value that we give to an object is very different. For example, in the MoMA, in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, now you have La Vespa, no? the scooter. This is an artwork from Andy Warhol, very valuable artwork. So everything is now changing quite a lot. So the status of work of art is changing a lot because we give, as Duchamp said, to an artwork the status. So it's very, very different. And nowadays, art is using, as I told you, it's the mirror of times. So now it's using all the technologies, all the possibilities. It goes everywhere. For example, after, and it is not original anymore because we are original until we have, if we have less than 10 pieces, it's original. So it's very, very different. And we are looking at the development, which implies, for example, that there are also digital artifacts. So it's very strange. What I think that is remaining, just to give an answer that is easier for you kids, is the idea. So what is happening is that the computers and machines now are creating things better than the hands of man. So, and still they use their hands. There are still painters, there are still sculptures, but what matters is the idea that is behind. So it's like a copyright. And I tell you also something. Probably also Leonardo was a copywriter because Leonardo had great ideas, but as you know, in Cenacolo and in many Battaglia di Anghiari, in many of his enterprises, he got lost in the end because it was not a good hand maker. Yeah. So the idea is the concept of art, and that's why we're now going through a period that we speak more and more about conceptual art, because nowadays the artist also wants to be helped by other people. They want to be, so this is for example, Catalan. Catalan had the idea to do this, to do those sculptures, but he did not make him himself. He hired somebody to do them. And so this is an artwork, for example. So what is this? Of course, the artist could not do that personally. This is an artwork. This is a land art. You know what's land art? Have you heard about land art? This guy, Christo, which by the way passed away, he packaged islands, buildings. So these are the islands packaged by Christo, islands, entire islands. So it's of course something that you cannot do with your hands, no? You need hundreds of people working for you.
So when you mentioned Duchamp and the fountain, does that mean, from what you're saying, that the viewer conveys status on the object, that art is in some way democratic?
Of course.
Yes?
This was the idea was this. We had gone through a period, many periods, in which the art was expression of the power. Okay, and this is the opposite, power to the people, because art was representing what religion or politics were asking to represent. And this is upside down.
Mm-hmm. But there is another power, which is the market.
Of course.
And the market is obviously playing a much bigger role in influencing art. For example, one of your slides is on NFTs.
Yes.
Which I think gladly have a thing of the past already, but it was a strange moment where little pixelated artworks could be selling for millions.
Yes. Art has become, especially modern and contemporary art, I must tell you, has become a business. The prices of modern and contemporary are much higher than generally than the prices of masters, which is quite strange because, of course, it's a problem of quantity. Of masters are less. Mm-hmm. But, of course, art is a kind of, we say cult goods, no? Which means that they go under the laws of fashion, of advertising, because all what we call cult goods, it's hyper goods, which means that they are goods that have an extremely added value. And what gives the extremely added value is the status of work of art. So there are a lot of processes of marketing that are now behind this. Why? Because then, before, art was something only for the leading class. The aristocracy, governments, and the powers, religious powers, and so on. Now, art is for everybody, which means that, as all the other goods, it has to follow the rules of the market, and the rules of the market are very complicated. So, it did not start in 1917. At that time, Duchamp was not so clever to understand that his prophecy was going to end in a different thing, which was capitalism. He didn't know. He was not so at that time he could not know. But that's what happened. Yeah. Yes.
Right. So we've got just a few more minutes, guys, to ask some questions. So really, anything you wanted to ask about contemporary art, this is your chance. Another one from our friend at the front there.
Question. No, I have one last question. So, my dad works like in the balloon museum, like he's the commercialista, like the one,
Which museum?
The balloon.
Okay.
Like he even helped other things, like Christmas World.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question is, like, do you even work with balloon museums and these things, like, for the art?
Allora, we work, as you can see, this is quite interesting. We work with many museums, because what is happening now, and this is what I wanted to tell you, is that the museum have many different purposes and objectives now. We are becoming hybrid, so the first museum that has them inside the cinema and the restaurant was the Pompidou, but now everything is doing. And the other thing is that we are trying to make networks, because the big museums, as you see, for example, the Guggenheim Museum and the Louvre Museum, there are chains of museums. They are chains. They export. This is the rotation of collections. So it's very important to have connections. I don't have this connection, but for example, I tell you what I'm doing now. Because I have a great collection that I cannot put on display in my space, now I have an exhibition opening, 2 exhibition openings, one in Parma, and I send there all the collection of Balla, which are 62 paintings from the gallery, and it's handmade, conceived and realized they're paying for that, they're paying a fee, and I send their part of the collection of Balla. So it's a monographic collection. This allows me to show to more people something that I can never have, because I can never have all my collection of Balla outside. Even when I had the Futurismo, it was not possible. On the other side, I'm sending part of the collection to Catania, which is the highlights from the 80s, because with this exhibition of Ceroli, I need the space of the rooms where I exhibit it. So it's very important because I can rotate the collection, make money, lending this, and also sharing the expenses. So for example, I'm doing an exhibition on Bice Lazzari now, and next year with the Metafisica. The first one is with the Pinacoteca di Brera in Milan, the second is with Palazzo Reale in Milan. It starts for the Olympic Games and then comes to me. Probably you read yesterday, Marina Abramovic is coming to the gallery, but she's going first to Venice. So between us, the Museum of especially the Museum of the Ministry of Culture, we are trying to organize things together, because it's very hard for us to compete with big chains of museums like the American, or the Tate, for example. The Tate galleries are full. So it makes a huge economy of scale.
Fantastic. I think a question at the back, and that's probably all the time we have. So let's make this a brilliant question. Sorry, Nicholas.
What was probably the hardest part of building your museum for you?
The hardest part of the work?
Of redesigning the museum.
Okay. You need a lot of fantasy, because you have a lot of fixed points. So the hardest part was the budget. Of course, it is always the hardest part. But if we don't consider the budget, because I'd love to change, I could. My building is a listed building, so I cannot even change the walls. The walls are there, the floors are there. So it was this. No, the most difficult part was, the choice, because we have 20,000 artworks. I want to display. I hope I can be able to display 1,000 only, which means I have to leave a lot of artworks in the back. So I cannot go for a personal choice. I have to think about a storytelling. I tell you something which is very easy to understand for you. What is a visit to the museum? It's an experience. What is an experience? It's like reading a book with your eyes. You go through a museum, you walk, okay? And walking, you have to perceive it. Even if you don't read, you can read the names of the artists, you can read the explanation of the rooms. But in the end, when you finish, you have to absorb a story. So in the problem of storytelling. So in order to have a very efficient storytelling, you need also to sacrifice something you like. So this was very difficult, because I put the visitor first, and so I wanted this path to be very clear. And so, for example, maybe something that was nice and was clever, but was not, because you cannot say everything. You have to follow an idea. And so I had to sacrifice something which was too much. And also for the space, which is not enough to display all the artwork. So this was the most difficult thing.
I think that's a lovely note to end on, the idea of storytelling in museums and following that sort of learning journey. You talked about being didactic spaces as well. Director Mazzolini, thank you so much for joining us and for answering all of our questions. I know you've got to rush off and do another bit of work shortly.
Yes.
So you're back to the museum. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Please join me in thanking.